what we might know about productive struggling. So we are going to share a link to the Padlet. If you can please the question is, what comes to mind when you hear productive struggling or struggle?
Do you have it on your screen? Do you want me to share the link?
I shared it.
Okay.
And the QR code is there if you wanted to do it on your phone. So there's options. Thank you for working on it. Once again, what comes to mind when you hear productive struggle? We'll give about a minute more. Okay, thank you for participating. So the question was, what comes to mind when we hear productive struggle? Some of the staff members might have also participated in the problem-based learning PD, and I know many of the teachers also have not. So just wanted to once again gauge what we kind of think of when we hear those words, productive struggle. So we see that some teachers mention students actively thinking about the problem or topic, students being challenged and having to use critical thinking skills and prior knowledge, problem solving, higher order thinking, working on something challenging and not giving up, having the courage to keep trying to solve the problem, putting in effort even when something may be difficult, taking the fundamentals that you have already learned and applying that to learning something new, problem solving, appropriately challenging work. So it seems like the overall theme here is really challenging yourself, not giving up, problem solving, higher order thinking. And that's pretty much what problem or productive struggle is. Just gonna go back to the slideshow so that you could see. And thank you to those who participated. So what is problem-based learning? Problem-based learning is a teaching method in which complex real-world problems are used as the vehicle to promote student learning of concepts and principles as opposed to direct presentation of facts and concepts. So when we originally thought or heard this, what came to mind was almost like, giving someone like parts of furniture and not giving them the manual yet, but you being there to kind of support the person, kind of figure things out based on what their prior knowledge might be. And then later on going into, okay, we're going to give you the manual. Let's kind of see what we knew, what we did, and then like, how can we make it better? So that's just kind of the analogy that we kind of thought of when we heard of problem-based learning. So there are two phases when it comes to problem-based learning, which is solve and share. And solve and share initially, we were like, oh, envisions the math curriculum that we've been using usually starts with a solve and share. And that's like right before the actual lesson in itself. So just to kind of connect it here, during this phase, the teacher's responsibility is to pose a task or problem that involves a new math concept or skill. The teacher will ensure that students are aware of the expectations, like we usually do when it comes to anything, right? We want to make sure that the students know the expectations, and then facilitate thinking and communication, just being that person who guides the group, guides the thinking. And then the student's responsibility is that they will develop a strategy or solution to pose problems. Students are encouraged to work collaboratively. Once again, something that the students are used to already. Reflect and communicate their thinking, and share, discuss, and critique solutions. So something that we also mention is like, we don't want to criticize someone, we want to critique, and there's a difference. Criticize really means to kind of state the negative in a negative way, versus critique is like, I want to help you become better. So here are some solutions. So that's something that we want the students to continue to practice, especially for our kids who are going into middle school and then eventually in the real world. And then phase 2 is the enhanced direct instruction. Teacher will build on students' thinking and work solving the problem to make connections to the new math idea, concept underlying in the lesson's problem. So once again, when it comes to the phases, to summarize, it just seems like we don't want to go directly into teaching, just assuming that they don't know, but give them that time to really tap into their prior knowledge, because some students might be able to actually solve it. And then that will help us to, I guess, better understand how we can lead and continue the lesson that is being taught. So that's why we want to tell the students, you know, the struggle is real and it's okay, because that's what productive struggle is.
Can you click to the next? Thank you. Okay, so there's a difference between regular struggle and productive struggle. So regular struggle is finding a solution or a path that's not immediately obvious, using reasoning and problem solving and tapping into your prior knowledge, and also coordinating that prior knowledge and evaluating the usefulness of that prior knowledge. Now, the productive part of that takes it one step further, okay? And that's where they use most of their thinking, and and it helps students progress towards understanding the new concept. So it's connecting what they know to what they're about to learn and working towards that understanding. And it's also teaching them how to communicate their thinking and their work, how they can explain what they did and why they did it. So really taking struggle to the next step is the productive struggle. Okay, so signs of productive struggle. The first part would be conversation occurring, aimed at understanding the problem. So this is working out your known and your unknown. I've modeled this heavily with my students, and so by this point in the year, when they see a problem, they should be identifying what they know about the problem and also what they're looking for. They can't solve a problem unless they know what they're looking for and what their goal is, right? So, excuse me, being able to identify what they know and what they don't know. It's also the activation of prior knowledge, including connecting to similar problems that may be helpful. Oh, we are multiplying decimals. I know that multiplication and division are inverse operations, right? So they can make connections to what they already know. They can use helpful tools and strategies. Can you use a ruler? Can I draw a bar diagram to display the problem? What tools or strategies can I use? Persevering through the problem, so perseverance, not giving up. Right? And justifying their thinking and critiquing others using accountable talk and math vocabulary. I know all three of us have worked a lot with accountable talk, and that kind of goes hand in hand with their explanation and their writing as well. Math is not just numbers, but it's also writing. There's a real writing component to it. So being able to integrate their accountable talk and using kind of sentence stems in their writing tied together. Things to avoid, okay? We don't want to tell students how to solve the problem. That defeats the entire purpose of this, right? We don't want to say, oh, you should do this. Let them get there. Let them realize, oh, this strategy may not be the best, or I'm using the wrong operation. Let them kind of work through that, and let them work through it together. Like, have them bounce off their peers. Okay, you're there to facilitate that conversation, not necessarily to drive it, but to kind of encourage that communication between students. Don't give direct hints. It's okay to be helpful, but make sure that it's intentional. Make sure you're encouraging the problem solving in it, and avoid breaking it into steps for them to solve. Like, you don't do that for them. If they want to break it down into steps, that's fine, but you shouldn't be saying, okay, do this, do this, do this, do this. Let them get there on their own. Okay. Facilitating productive struggle. Okay, so this is where we come in as a facilitator of this. Right? We need to give students time to select their own strategy and struggle regarding perseverance. Ask questions, scaffold students' thinking without doing the work for them or telling them what to do. Help students self-evaluate their thinking, kind of correct it and kind of facilitate that as you go. Help them critique their thinking and work of others, use the accountable talk sentence stems, really encourage students to say, tell me why you think that. Because if you're modeling that for them, then they can do it with themselves, right? Why are you thinking that way? Can you explain your thinking? Make sure that you tell them to give evidence. Draw an attention aspects of problem solving without telling how to solve. Use formative assessment techniques focused on student understanding, right? We should be assessing as we go. That's the purpose for a check for understanding, right? Who gets it, who doesn't get it, who needs reinforcements when you eventually go into groups, who are those students that you should be pulling, who are those students that need a little bit more support, and facilitate discussions, misconceptions, and struggles, okay? Those misconceptions are bound to happen, helping students realize those misconceptions. I know that Miss Samaya does that at the end of her lessons. I've kind of integrated that as well, where, we talk at the end, what is a misconception that you noticed another student had? What is a misconception that you had? So kind of talking about how we misunderstand things, because that helps us improve how we solve it the next time. Okay, and then once again, communicating those expectations and encouraging student collaboration.
And just to add, when I saw this facilitating productive struggle, all of the components when it comes to this almost reminded me of like the inquiry work that we used to do using Solve. Having the students work on a real world problem, mathematical problem, having them in groups and talking about the problem in itself, what is it asking us to find, and then kind of sharing that in discussion of like, what do we already know? How can we solve these problems? What are some of the strategies that, that we've learned? And then the teachers just kind of going around and once again, facilitating the conversation and just really listening to what the students have to say to each other. And then eventually going into feedback where they could do like a gallery walk and they could analyze the work. And then within a certain amount of time, they're, writing glows and grows, like what are some things that you've done really well? What are some things that you can improve on? And then just having that reflecting process. But we're also going to go into what it looks like in the classroom. So Ms. Amaya.
So what does it look like in the classroom? Student-centered. Display the solve and share for students. Take time to read the problem. Encourage students to discuss what they know from the problem and what they need to solve for. So one thing that I like to use from the Envision book is the guided questions, and going over just those guided questions with the students, or having them turn and talk with their tables and discuss what their answers might be for those guided questions. What are the hidden questions of this multi-step word problem? What do we need to know before we solve it? And then having them go into their resource notebook, finding things that they can use to help them solve the problem. And one thing that we always stress to them is solve it any way that you choose. And that's what they envisions. They have that at the end of every single solve and share. And we just emphasize that to the students. Give students time to work through the problem and collaborate with their peers. Encourage students to persevere and try a variety of strategies. Like I said, pull out those resource notebooks or those toolkits that you have in the classroom, have them go through it, see what they can use, to help them. Have student critique each other's work. This can look similar to error analysis, encourage students to explain their thinking and reasoning. So one thing that I love doing during the we do is have a student come up and maybe present their work and explain their thinking, and then have the other students share what they feel, or maybe they did it a different way and what step did they do different, so that we can collaborate on the thinking and link them together. So accountable talk, that's what Ms. Diao was speaking about. This is something that she uses with her students, and we all do. It might look a little different in each classroom. So teach students how to express themselves. Productive conversation leads to productive problem solving. And I love seeing that in many of my groups where they're like, hey, how did you represent this problem? No, I think you missed a step. Having that conversation go back and forth, and then they're debating and having they're the ones facilitating the conversation, and you're just listening to them. So building the prior knowledge. So one of the big things about the PD was vocabulary and just having students using their prior knowledge. And how do we do this for students? So one thing that we do as fifth grade, we always have a vocabulary slide where we review the vocabulary maybe for the week, or we go over it for every single lesson. We use the vocabulary throughout the lesson, and then you start to see the students using the vocabulary words in their explanations, or even in the center work. Instead of putting students maybe on iReady, having them collaborate to figure out vocabulary and matching them, and how would they use them when they're doing error analysis to critique each other's work. Work samples. So these are some of the things that we do in our classrooms together. We have a word problem detective where we created this graphic organizer with Solve, where the students, we input different word problems onto it. The students have a checklist. They go through their checklist to either highlight, circle, think about what the question's asking them, use Solve to break the problem down, brainstorm different strategies that they can use to solve it. They also have a place to maybe draw out their thinking or organize their work or even check their work. We have Solve posters where you see this again with the collaboration between the students, where they have to work together to use Solve to break apart the problem. We also have a Stick It Together, which is a really cool, fun way of collaborating. The students get to solve the problem separately, and then they come together to discuss and collaborate. Oh, what did you do? What step did you do? And they choose, like, oh, I like the way that you explained your problem. I love the way that you showed this step. And then they collaborate and put it all together. The last thing we have is how do we tie it all together? And Ms. Bial touched on this a little bit already. So reflection and share out. You always want to hear what mistakes they made, what misconceptions that they had in class today. One of the things that I love doing with my kids is asking them what are they most proud of in the lesson, because I always want to highlight the things that they really did well, because it encourages them the next day to improve either on that or choose another skill to work on, and asking them what are your goals for tomorrow's lesson, because we might be continuing fraction, but if I'm doing a reteach of what we did the day before, I want to see, okay, I know the day before I made the mistake of not flipping or doing the reciprocal. So today I'm going to work on making sure I'm doing that step. And that's it. Any questions?
Thank you guys for sharing that. I'm hoping that any of our team members actually do have questions, because as we walk around and complete those last minute observations and reflecting on the observation process and the feedback that was given, thank you for celebrating and highlighting your teacher practices, because the expectation that is aligned with our district absolutes as well as our instructional priorities is those are components that we like to see. So thank you very much for sharing that, really applying that knowledge and providing us with student work samples that we could actually see in the classroom. Is there anybody else that would like to add anything in regards to our topic this morning? I see Ms. Pena's hand is up.
Hi, I wanted to first of all thank you. Your presentation was wonderful. And I do want to say that my son, who's in eighth grade, he can figure out math in his head, but the problem for him was that he wasn't showing his work. He wasn't showing, how to solve it, and he honestly failed like the beginning of this year. And the teacher was like, "Now that you're in eighth grade, you need to show the work." And it was hard for him because he could just figure out. He didn't know the steps in figuring it out. He just knew it in his head. So it's very important for us as elementary educators to teach the children that because they're going to need this. It is part of being college and career ready. So thank you.
Thank you for sharing. Okay. I do have a a quick reflection question that I'd like to ask the fifth grade team. What are some of the parts of productive struggle that you found particularly hard for students and that was a major challenge for you to teach?
I think I struggled a lot with those students who are just like I have students who have test anxiety and like just problems working through that, especially if they're like struggling with that concept. So like really getting them to think in that type of way is okay. I may be struggling right now, but I'm not always going to struggle. I have to work through that struggle. A lot of them just say, I don't get it, and that's it. And like they're done and they don't want to work at it. So really like instilling in them, like I need to keep like digging into the work in order for me to truly understand it. So like that's what I struggled with some of my kids who like have that like anxiety aspect where I want to get it right now. Well, it's okay to not get it right now, but you will get it if you keep working at it.
I think for me, it would be a lot of the students view it as, okay, I am the only one struggling with this, and not realizing, hey, maybe if I collaborate with my peers, and I see this trend a lot in my lower groups, maybe it's a little like, oh, if I open up and say that I'm struggling with this vocabulary word, or solving this one problem, or breaking it apart, or finding what's important in the problem, then everyone's going to make fun out of me or something. So just pushing them to open up and letting them know that that's okay, and creating that safe space for the students.
And for me, I think, I mean, to be very real, I feel like there's certain students that will genuinely in front of me or in front of an adult will show productive like struggle. They'll, hear me out, they'll hear their peers out, but then when they're on their own, I'm not sure if they're fully engaging in that. So sometimes with certain students, I feel like it could become like an act. So kind of getting them to that point where they genuinely want to understand what productive struggle is for themselves and not for anyone else around them. So just having them understand what that really is, I think can be challenging, especially for certain students who are already struggling with like just the basic foundations. So yeah.
Wow. Thank you. Thank you very much for sharing that for everyone. We complete these learning series that are teacher led. I know that I'm adding my 2 cents in the conversation because this time of year, we're thinking about so many things as we spring into next school year. So, like when we talk about our principal priorities for next year, when we talk about and reflect on where our discussion protocols really lie within our building, that's a great starting point, right? To really see where are some of our practices land and see where the gaps are because they are glaring. We are a school when we look at our teacher practices and we share out the feedback, we land overwhelmingly in the area of developing when it comes to domain 3. So we know that domain 3 on the Danielson rubric is something that we're going to focus on and really pay a lot of attention to, and this is aligned with that. Thank you guys for sharing that. It's now 8:45 in the morning. We have recorded this session like we always do. If you'd like to go back and reflect on some of the points that were made, or you need some clarification, they're always available every morning, right? We have them in our drive. So have a great day, everyone, and we'll see you throughout the day. And if you need anything, just reach out to us.